Okay, everyone, welcome back to the second of this morning's sessions, and we're going to start with a talk by Andrew Giddance, who's a cactologist, a lifelong cactologist. He started growing cacti when he was very, very young, as a young boy. Andrew is curator at the Gibraltar Botanic Gardens, which of course specializes in cacti and succulent plants, and he's also currently undertaking a PhD in the systematics, biogeography, reproductive biology, and conservation status of the cactus genus Pilosocereus in the Caribbean and Andean regions. And Andrew is going to talk to us about his work in situ and ex-situ research and conservation of cacti at the Gibraltar Botanic Gardens. So over to you, Andrew.
Today's presentation, I would like to talk about the main threats to cacti, in situ and ex-situ conservation, and the role of Gibraltar Botanic Gardens in research and conservation. I will be using terms of in situ and ex-situ, so I thought that maybe at first I will quickly explain them. So there are two ways of protecting living organisms. In situ is on-site and in natural population of plant of animals, and ex-situ conservation literally means off-site. And we can divide it in cryopreservation, and that's conservation or storage pollen, tissue, embryos in liquid nitrogen, seed banking, and that storage seeds in a temperature and moisture controlled environment, and cultivation collections, like for example in botanical gardens. Cacti are one of the major group of plants that have been surveyed by scientists for their conservation status. The Cactaceae family has approximately 1,500 species native to the New World, from which about 1,400 have been assessed using IUCN Red List criteria, and significant number have been given category of threats. On this map, you can see where so far fieldwork has been conducted by me. At the moment, I concentrate my research in the Caribbean region and Peru. Visiting cactus habitats through America reveals many kinds of impacts that affect these plants in an ever-increasing rate. Even though many species are naturally found in relatively barren environments, where agriculture cannot be easily practiced, other factors can come into play. It is quite difficult to decide where to start talking about threats, but I think that one of the most important factors to do fieldwork and research plans are roads. Unfortunately, roads, that means that there is some human activities, and the roads themselves can be devastating for habitats and causes catastrophic soil erosion. In dry habitats, very often those roads lead to mines or quarries. All mountains disappear to extract, for example, rare metals like here, copper in Chile, or building materials like in Canada or Cuba. In 2016, we visited endangered Neoporteia recondita. Unfortunately, it grows on gravel processing plant near Antofagasta. A year later, some other researchers visited this place and reported that the site is totally destroyed and this cactus is considered now extinct in the wild. And that's town of Antofagasta, of course. This is also threatening a lot of habitats around it. On this slide, you can see unplanned and illegal settlements near Taltal, Chile, and another example of rare species, a Neoporteria occulta, which probably soon will disappear. Leisure resorts and sports facilities are a huge threat, especially in the Caribbean. This beautiful beach soon will be developed. In Cuba, we observed new hotels built on keys, small islands on the north coast. This big road is reclaimed land, which building this, it's changing the currents and water level and destroy all coastal environments. Massive golf courses, cacti and other vegetation can only survive next to rocky outcrops. Opuntia fragilis, very widespread species through North America, but this is quite important site. This is northmost location of any cacti. It's 4 degrees lower than Arctic Circle, and those plants can survive to minus 50 degrees Celsius. Unfortunately, it grows on slopes, southwest facing slopes of Peace River, which now will be changed into hydroelectric dam. Iconic, one of the most cultivated cactus on the planet, Echinocactus grusoni. It's, like I say, it's very, very common in cultivation, and it's extremely rare in habitat because of another hydroelectric dam. I visited this place in 2017, and we found only few individuals all hanging on the cliffs. During El Niño years, when it rains in higher mountains, massive floods threaten and developing cities in coastal Atacama Desert. So Chileans built very serious flood defenses. And that's how it looks like after building, and that's it should look like. Unfortunately, nobody is allowed to touch those plants before builders will come. So bulldozer can come and mix them with soil and destroy all habitat, but nobody is allowed to remove them before, which I will not comment. Heartbreaking situation we observed in Dominican Republic. The national flower of Dominican Republic is a very primitive cactus called Rose of Bayahibi. It's extremely rare, and it's known only from few individuals, which is supposed to grow next to a petrol station called Flower de Bayahibi. We spent 3 days to try to find the species without any success, and then we turn our attention to just freshly cut forest behind this petrol station, and that's where we found them. We called Department of Environment and the Botanical Garden, but it looks like nobody was interested in saving these plants. It's very difficult to find them from there. To sustain our population, of course, we need food. A huge amount of natural habitats, as we know, were destroyed or changed for agriculture purposes. Here is only just one of the examples, Opuntia cross columbiana, which at the moment it's a taxon which taxonomic status is still unresolved, but is threatened at the moment by wine production. Doesn't matter that this will be Mexico, Peru, or any other countries. Previously unproductive drylands now can be irrigated and changed into short-term crop production. Like here we can see prickly pear, but that can be wine or can be asparagus, very common at the moment in Peru. Very quickly this soil accumulates a lot of salt, and it's toxic and become toxic to any crop. So it's very short-term production. I was very disappointed with landscape in Cuba. As we know, most of the habitat in Cuba were turned into sugarcane plantations. So it's very difficult to find any natural habitats there. Agroforestry, it's extremely devastating for natural habitats. Here we end up in this valley by accident, honestly, we just took wrong turn, and no cacti were reported from there, and seeing eucalyptus forest, we were totally resigned. But we started asking local people, and surprisingly, there was a lobivia growing there, which never was reported for this region. Another problem is over-grazing. That's my favorite animals. Again, wherever you are, it has been Mexico, Morocco, Peru, Caribbean, they devastate, they destroy everything. That's how land looks like when it's overgrazed. And that's the same beach. The owner of this big hotel managed to fence off massive piece of land, and that's how vegetation should look like. It's a forest with cacti growing or outcrops, and I'll come back to this, how that's look like on the other side of the fence. Unfortunately, I use the word unfortunately quite a lot in this presentation, but there will be positive side of this lecture. Another problem of our wasteful society is rubbish. It's just plastic is everywhere, even in places where we thought that are quite remote. In this time, I also would like to tell you or show you a few pictures from our trip to Haiti. Not very often people dare to go to this place, and we also didn't know what to expect. But let's start from rubbish. Rubbish is everywhere over there. They don't collect it. They usually build this massive amount of it and set on fire. And that's capital, Port-au-Prince. Sometimes when you travel through bigger towns, it looks like a war zone. There is lack of supply of drinking water there, and local communities depend on rivers. There is also lack of, or is no electricity available for most of the population. People live very simple life, they are self-sustained, they are extremely friendly, and they always want to help, and their knowledge about surrounding and the habitat is incredible. When we went there in 2017, we didn't know what to expect. Most of the tropical part of Haiti is destroyed. Only 2% of forest in Haiti left, and especially for hardwood or for plantation of mango and other tropical fruits. There was no information on what happened with the drylands. And the last time cacti were reported from this area more than 100 years ago. We were very surprised to see cacti in very good shape. At the moment, human activities help cacti to thrive. Reason is that there is no fuel like gas, coal, or electricity for cooking. So local people cut forest, dry forest, for charcoal production. They don't cut it, they copy trees. When the trees regrow, it takes a few years, they provide shelter for cacti to germinate and young plants to survive. It's quite interesting habitat. Wherever you travel in Haiti, you can smell charcoal or burning wood because of charcoal production. That's a picture of one of the main highways in Haiti, and the lorries full of charcoal are present everywhere. We don't hear a lot about Haiti unless there is some natural disaster, like earthquake in 2010, when from 200,000 to 300,000 people died during this one earthquake. Hurricanes or cholera outbreaks. But history of this country is remarkable. It was first ever nation to successfully gain independence through the slave revolt in 1803. On those two pictures, here and here, you can see Sansochi Palace, built by Henry I, or this amazing citadel, very well preserved citadel in North Haiti. Coming back to like unexpected, or some threads, in this case quite unexpected, we're coming back to Canada. That's Badlands in southern Alberta, a very famous place called Dinosaur Park. That's where most of the very well preserved dinosaur skeletons come from. Unfortunately, excavation of those places is a threat for native vegetation, including this Escobaria vivipara. Dendrocereus is a genus of only with 2 species. One grows in Cuba, one in Hispaniola. It's only known from mature big specimens. There is no regeneration of this genus. The problem is, or they produce hundreds of seeds and hundreds of fruits and thousands of seeds, but unfortunately there is no animal or vector which would disperse those fruits. So that was before megafauna, like for example, giant sloth, which is extinct. But land management, Leslie was talking about stopping fire. And allowing, at the moment, that's Point Pili National Park with Opuntia humifusa. Fires is stopped. Vegetation, it's allowed to develop too much. There's a lot of invasive species. And when the fire goes through it, eventually goes through it, it burns in a lot higher temperatures and destruction is a lot more higher. My adventure with Caribbean started from going or being asked to help in ex-situ conservation of cacti in British Virgin Islands. The problem is that a lot of introduced pests and diseases are, at the moment, is a threat for native cacti. Like, for example, this one, Harrisia cactus mealybug from Argentina and Chile, moth, Cactoblastis cactorum, or weevil, which destroy agaves. Last but not least is climate change. Sea rising, in this occasion, we visited Lake Enriquillo. This is inland lake, salt lake, on the border of Haiti and Dominican Republic. We were trying to find another primitive cactus called Pereschia portulacifolia. Most of the information from herbariums which we had came that they're supposed to grow on the shore of this lake. Unfortunately, we couldn't find them, and we suspect that they are long gone because they are flooded. This lake is in depression, and you can see on the GPS it's already 22 meters below sea level, but I think that the water is rising. It's a big population of crocodiles over there, if somebody's interested. Desertification and temperature rise, it's the best place to see this is northern part of Atacama Desert. There are a lot of dead plants over there. This is Copiapoa solaris, extremely slow growing species, even in cultivation under very, very good conditions. If you think that in habitat, those plants maybe get rain every 10 years, and the clumps were massive. So we can suspect, or we can speculate that some of the individuals were the oldest living creatures on the planet, but now they are dead. What happened with the plants which grow in high altitudes? For example, here we found one of the Cumulopuntia on 4,830 meters above sea level. There's not a lot space for them to grow up. Those species, if the climate will be changing and temperature will be rising, there's not a lot of space for them to go up. If you believe or not, that's supposed to be a forest. It is the eastmost point of Cuba. It was hit by a hurricane 3 years ago. Plants are starting to regrow, but at the moment the frequency and strength of the hurricanes, it's a lot bigger. Don't understand me wrong, the Caribbean cacti evolved to grow with hurricanes, but like I say, the strength and the intensity and frequency, it's a lot higher. Those plants are maybe never will be able to regrow. Overcollection. Very rarely we see plants used for medicinal purposes. Here in Dominican Republic, this very rare Melocactus lameri was sold for kidney diseases. And then we have overcollection. It's quite controversial subject, because if we think about this massive destruction of habitats, when thousands of people thousands of plants were killed, and then only few species from the family Cactaceae is endangered by overcollection. Sometimes I think that many researchers and environmental bodies are too scared and too dependent from the governments, and especially big companies like mining companies, so they don't talk a lot about habitat destruction, and they use overcollection as a big media media news. But don't understand me wrong, there are species which are endangered by overcollection, like this Melocactus matanzanus in Cuba, very common in cultivation at the moment. But to see this, it took us 2 hours to convince a guard to take us. There are armed guards right now next to those populations, and there's only few individuals left. Very beautiful Echinocereus lindsay in Baja California. This place is always kept in secret because it could be very easily destroyed. It's a small population of this plant. Tiny Pediocactus peblesianus growing on gypsum. Everything what is pretty and small and collectors have desired, doesn't matter with this little cacti or orchids, they are under threat. Or this Rimocactus laui from Chile. Sclerocactus parviflorus, we found quite weird way of in situ conservation. They just fenced off few individuals and put little shading over them. Is it successful or not? And we can speculate about this, but at least something is done. In the US, it's easier because it's highly possible that the plants won't be stolen from this enclosure. If this would be Mexico or Peru, those plants anyway would disappear. So you see the challenges of in situ conservation. So we could maybe start ex situ in botanical gardens as a collections. And ideally, it would be in country of origin. But there is a problem. There is lack of resources and lack of training. Here I will show a few pictures, and please, I don't want to criticize my colleagues. I just want to show the problems, not point to any of botanical gardens, and I will not tell you from where those pictures come from. This is big botanical garden in Caribbean, and believe me, plants, the same species grow a lot better behind the fence of these botanical gardens than inside of the botanical garden when they're supposed to be looked after. There is, again, lack of resources and training. Another botanical garden, smaller islands, plants were dug out from habitat and just slowly dying in the displays. The same botanical garden, that's how Mammillaria nivosa should look like, and it looks like outside, and inside the plants are not very happy, and if you believe or not, there's a frog living in this little hole. Okay, so we have problems with countries where the cacti come from. So let's move to Europe. We have a lot more money for conservation and a lot more trained horticulturists. There are a few pictures from big collection and big botanical garden in France. As you can see, that's not a lot better. There's a lot of mistakes in cultivation and horticulture level here, and plants are infested by pests and diseases. It was interesting when I had walkabout with the curator and the staff, and I was showing different plants, including this Echinocereus here, and say, oh, you have to throw away this one, and the question was why? Because they are dead? If the staff do not recognize plants that they are dead or not, that's a little scary. Can you imagine to go to hospital and your doctor doesn't realize that you are dead or not? So again, training and sometimes passion, it's lacking. In this place, it was scary that few weeks before, French customs confiscated big illegal shipment of Mexican cacti. And there is agreement between this place and government and customs to bring confiscated plants there. Unfortunately, they planted them in the same way how they planted the previous one, next to infested plants. So guess what will happen with this collection. Another problem is, in Northern Europe, there are little, the cacti are grown usually under protected environments or greenhouses. And what is the point to grow those tree-like cacti? Why we can't collaborate? For example, in Gibraltar, we can grow big plants and allow them to reach proper mature size. And those places could concentrate on smaller species. We can go to UK, very famous garden, licking benches, infested plants, the same situation. Very, very bad growing medium, water moisture retentive. If you have this kind of mosses growing with cacti, it's asking for troubles. When you remove the soil, all the roots are dead. Lack of drainage hole. That's vegetative production in this place. It's sad. That's not how ex-situ conservation should look like. And when you lift some of the plants, I'm sure you realize that not roots. But that's the last picture, depressing picture from this lecture. There are good examples. For example, Desert Botanical Garden, Phoenix, Arizona. Amazing, very modern displays, high level of genetic diversity, high level of plants from natural source. They have their own seed bank, molecular lab, and they are very involved in rescuing native cacti. In Europe, we have Monaco, a little different kind of displays, a little older fashion, but it's totally different garden built on cliff. So the display has to be different. And if you have opportunity to visit their behind the scenes collections, scientific collections, very well curated, very well kept, and everything what I say about Phoenix, we can apply here. So let's see what do we do in Gibraltar Botanic Gardens and how we look. In 2013, Dr. Keith Ben-Susan and I decided to start from the nurseries. I believe that nursery is always the heart of botanical garden, of any botanical garden. We started with this little propagation house. We grow everything from, or most of the stuff from seeds, which I bring from the field work when we have permits. And we try to concentrate, like I mentioned, on the Caribbean region and Peru, and also limit amount of species. We don't want to have everything. We prefer to have more plants of one species than one of each. And that's for many different levels, especially for conservation. If you want to reintroduce, you have to have high genetic diversity. We are also improving our horticulture techniques, like we grow everything in lava, and our feeding and watering regime is very strict. We also graft plants, like you can see here, this Remocactus laui. The plants it's possible to germinate, but it's impossible to grow on their own roots. So we graft them. In a year, plants produce flowers, and we can pollinate them to control pollination in chambers and collect plants and collect seeds and deposit them in seed bank. If you never visited behind the scenes, our behind the scenes collection, I will just show you a few pictures. As you can see, quite a lot of plants. They are still small, and it takes some time them to develop, but I always say that somebody planted this little acorn, and now we have massive oak at Kew. So somebody have to start. Maybe I will never see those plants in their mature stages, but hopefully next generation will. And we are constantly developing the nursery. A part of cacti, we grow also other succulents. There is a lot of adeniums, euphorbias, burseras, boswellias, different agaves, different asclepiads. And when the plants are big enough, we plant beds outside. It takes some time before we can design something, and sometimes we have to wait. But in the next 4 or 5 years, you will see a lot more changes in Alameda. We also collaborate with Convent Garden. We just, last year we planted there our spare plants, but I hope that in the future we will be able to deposit our rare species there as a backup. because of developing collections and more we are famous because of growing cacti, we have more and more cactus scientists, cactus experts coming to visit us, and we have different meetings. At the moment we have Dr. Nigel Taylor with us, and that's really, it's helpful for me and for developing the collections. So fieldwork, what we do, a part of collecting material for our collections, we also try to solve different cactus mysteries or different problems, taxonomical problems. I travel mainly with Paul Hoxie from Cambridge, and this person is an amazing field botanist and really, really good cactologist. He always finds some interesting plants to look for. Here we can see one of the dragon fruits, which was described on the base of this, this drawing in 1645, around 1645. But everybody since then say that's impossible, the plumier, the drawing is wrong. None of the dragon fruits has spines on the fruit. So Paul decided to go and check. So that's Bequia, that's a small island south of St. Vincent. And we went there, and guess what? We found a Hylocereus with spiny fruit. So we resurrected this species this year. Can you imagine that nobody has seen this plant since 1645? And that's yeah, we have quite few examples like this. During the fieldwork, it's amazing that there are still untouched and beautiful habitats. This is in Chile, on the east slopes of Andes, and you have Salt Lake. On the other side, you can see Bolivia. Sometimes our fieldwork is taking us to quite weird places, like this Peru, in Peru, and that's Paul. It's taking a picture, and that's Nazca lines. If you see this from above, you don't even consider any cacti growing there, but there is a lot of things going on. In Caribbean, main islands in Caribbean are quite destroyed. So if you want to see a good population of cacti, you have to hire local fishermen. Here we were going on smuggling boat to famous Tortuga Island, north from Haiti. Usually the boats are a lot smaller, and very often the fishermen can't land on them, so they drop us in the water and we have to swim to cacti. I never thought that I would be swimming to cacti ever, but it's quite common at the moment in the Caribbean with our research. We climb the cliffs, and we find quite interesting material. Very often we go in places where the closest settlements are too far to go, and we camp. But it is worth. If you wake up to this kind of views, it's worth. We also meet a lot of amazing people, people who are still connected to the nature. They know their habitats. Every time during every fieldwork trip, we have little album with pictures, and when you show people will take you. They exactly know, especially Haiti. People exactly know where they grow. And we meet people who are happy to share this information with us. Okay, that's it. Thank you. I think that's one went quite fast. Any questions?
Okay. Andrew, thank you very much for that. Finished in record time.
Yeah, when I trained this, it was 45 minutes. So yeah, sorry, stress.
Any questions from the floor or any comments? Not for the moment. Okay, I haven't received any questions from social media yet, so I'll start with a question of my own in that case. Andrew, what makes Gibraltar a good place for ex-situ conservation of cacti when obviously there are no cacti in Europe or anywhere near Gibraltar?
The main is climate. A part of that we have Mediterranean climate, it's more subtropical climate here, and the palette of plants which we can grow, it's incredible. We also don't have any dormancy, or dormancy season for those plants is very short. We have just 2 months, like maybe between December and January, and then in August. So we can speed up of growth of plants quite incredible. I never have seen in my 34 years old or 40 years time of growing cacti, I never have seen that those plants can grow so fast. And also we can concentrate of species which I mentioned before, some other botanical gardens can't because of restrictions of greenhouses. We can really grow them to let them to mature. And also we can concentrate of plants which are more heat-loving, which again, in northern climate, you need spend a lot of money for heating the greenhouses to keep them alive. We can just grow them outside without any costs and concentrate on those species, like, for example, Caribbean.
Nigel Taylor.
I have told it.
Okay. I work with Andrew, and one of the things that may surprise some members of the audience, the wider audience, is that Gibraltar's climate is very good for growing cacti, but perhaps not entirely for the reasons you might expect. Yes, daytime temperatures can be high, there's a lot of sun. Andrew's got the growing medium right using lava. But what is really important for cacti is that the nights should not be too warm. When the night temperatures are very high, cacti don't grow because cacti and quite a number of other succulents have a very unusual physiological system, which is called technically crassulation, acid metabolism. And this is a system where the stomata, the breathing pores, which have to absorb carbon dioxide, the carbon building block of the plant, open at night. In most conventional plants, they open in the daytime. But the stimulus for these stomata, the breathing pores to open at night, is a drop in temperature. And the temperature needs to drop down to between maybe 15 or 20 degrees Celsius, and for some species, even lower. And it will feel even cold to us, these temperatures, but these temperatures are necessary, otherwise the plants effectively suffocate. And when you get very warm weather, in the middle of summer, when you have warm nights, strangely, these plants that are so adapted to high temperatures of the desert stop growing. Right now they're growing very well because the nights are cool, and so the stomata and therefore the plants are breathing properly. And this is something which, if you try and grow cacti further north, where in general the nights are cooler, they do okay. And the problem is keeping them warm enough during the daytime and during the winter. But here in Gibraltar, in contrast perhaps to other warm temperate or subtropical places, we have the predominance of cooler nights, and that's the key thing that makes these plants grow throughout the majority of the year, as Andrew was saying. Thank you.
Nigel, thank you very much for that, because I was about to bring you into the conversation, so you preempted that. And any other questions from the floor before I ask another question of my own? No? Okay, so Andrew, you spoke extensively about the threats to cacti in their native habitats and how well inevitably it's due to human impact. Do you think that these impacts are due mainly to ignorance, or is human, shall we say, conflict of interest between the interest of humans and the interest of cacti? Is that inevitable, or would it be possible to marry the interests of local communities with conservation?
I think I criticize a lot of development, the threats as a habitat destruction by development of cities, roads, towns, but you know, we can't stop it. We can't stop growing our population, and it's sometimes I feel bad telling local communities that they shouldn't do this or this when we in Europe destroyed our habitats long time ago. So please don't forget. Also, we can't demonize mining companies when all of us have all those gadgets which needs rare metals to produce. So yes, that's the conflict. But I think education of people, and you see Haiti. Haiti is just an incredible example. On the dry side, of course, they destroyed the habitats on tropical side was they were totally different story. But on drylands, people still care about the habitat and they know it. Just now, starting educate them on how to care about this, and maybe start. I don't know. It's very often with over-collection, local people are involved into it. Maybe they should be educated. No, we can take people for tours and earn money from this kind of activities.
Absolutely. I'm going to take a question from YouTube before we move back to the floor. This is from S. Chiswell again, who is asking a very interesting question because there isn't only one answer, and perhaps you can tell us a bit about it. It's what would be the natural pollinators of cacti, e.g. in Peru or in Canada?
So I think a majority of cacti will be bee-pollinated. There are also beetle-pollinated cacti, moth-pollinated cacti, and a lot of night flowering will be bud pollination. So there's, and of course hummingbirds, yes. So it depends from adaptation and habitat. There is quite a wide range of pollinators.
And I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that before we move back to Nigel, which is whether you can tell us about the special adaptations that flowers might show depending on what species they're pollinated by.
So if we have hummingbird pollination, the flower will be clustering, so it will be very narrow tube with a lot of nectar, and usually they are red because birds can see different colors. And they will open, of course, during the day. Very often hummingbirds flies early in the morning or late afternoon, so flowers will just open in this time. If we think about night moth pollination, this will be very high scented, big flower with a lot of nectar. Bud pollinated flowers will be a lot smaller with this, can I say pungent smell? Yeah, which bud is attracted to buds. Will be a lot stronger because buds are a little clumsy to land on them. Some of them just hover to collect nectar. And bee will be radial flower, very broad, open, yellow mainly, but it can be any other color.
Thank you. Nigel Taylor again.
I was going to go back to the previous discussion concerning man's inexorable progress using habitats. And one of the problems I think that cacti and other desert plants face is in the eyes particularly perhaps of politicians, those habitats, they look pretty barren. There doesn't seem to be much vegetation. And so, it's okay to mine there because there's nothing to damage. But of course, in these very marginal habitats, the plants are cryptic, they're very hard to see, they're very specialized, and while they may not be conspicuous, they are very special parts of the world's plant diversity. So politically, it is a difficult argument to make that you should preserve some plants, albeit very unusual plants, in an environment that already looks completely wrecked because the conditions for most development of nature are not there. And so then mining can easily make the argument, well, there's nothing here to damage, we can mine as much as we like.
Nigel, a follow-up question to that, because Andrew told us how many species of cacti have been described approximately, is what contribution cacti make to global plant diversity. So how does the size of the family Cactaceae compare to other families? Is it a species-rich family? Is it a fairly species-poor family? Does it sit somewhere in between?
The answer to that question is really one of geography. There's only one cactus species which occurs naturally outside of the Americas. That's an epiphyte. It's very widespread. It's not threatened in any way. The whole of the rest of the family are endemic to the Americas. And there's only one family in the Americas that is largely endemic, which is the Bromeliad family, the pineapple family, which is a little bit larger than the cacti. But these two families are the most important in terms of diversity in the whole of the Americas. And let's not forget that in the Americas, North and South and the Caribbean, we have massive biodiversity of plants. So in the context of the Americas, or the New World as traditionally it was called, cacti are very important indeed. They are not certainly the family with most numerous species, but especially in the dry lands, they become very often what we would call keystone members of the vegetation. You have whole forests made up of columnar cacti, where the columnar cacti are the most conspicuous part of the vegetation. And then we must bring in the animal vectors, because it is known from various kinds of research that bats in particular are highly dependent on cacti. There are even bats that effectively operate like farmers. They pollinate the flowers at night, and then later, some months later, they will come and eat the fruits that they have created through their pollination. And of course, then they distribute the seeds. So there are a number of, especially in these marginal habitats where bats will have a struggle to survive. You may even have a lock and key mechanism where if the native cacti disappear, the bats will disappear, and vice versa. So you have these key ecological relationships which are very important to maintain. And I think most people looking at a cactus would never imagine it had any connection with a bat, but it certainly does in many cases.
Thank you. Andrew, anything that you would like to add to that? No. Yeah. Okay, are there any more questions? No? If there are no more questions, then we're going to move on with the next talk. So, Nigel, if you'd like to. Thank you very much.